I am back to Stonewall and joined as well. From here, I get a sweep of the whole thing.
Daryl, welcome back. Welcome back. The 1980s rock drummer.
Podcast.
Functional Human Podcast. So, you know, it's funny about this show, Daryl. We both do so much prep, and we can, and it's funny during the week. I think we can tell when the other one is doing prep because like random questions will just get thrown out without any explanation.
Mostly me.
What?
Mostly me sending you questions.
And then I'm collecting, you know, things that I think we'll find interesting, that the audience will find interesting, that you'll have a reaction to, you know, not always a negative reaction. Sometimes it's, you know, sometimes it's a positive thing, sometimes, but it's just fun. And so last week I had all these things, and some of them are just going to have to bleed over into next week. And maybe I'll just do a teaser. What do you think about that? We don't do a lot of teasers here on the show. We just kind of go, but I don't know. I feel like I have a couple of things that hit the headlines, and maybe you've seen some of these, maybe you haven't, Daryl. So I'm just going to go through them as like a smorgasbord of stuff that we could talk about over the next few weeks.
Okay.
You know,
I'm going to start making a list. What's smorgas? Is that English?
I don't know.
Oh, Lord. At least stay with English. I already have a hard time with English. Don't throw me made up words.
It's fair. It's very fair.
I can't even re-say it. Smorgasbord?
Smorgasbord. Maybe it's Swedish? I don't know. I don't know. So last week, Daryl and I did Bovaer, the cow additive. And we're going to talk a little more about that because I still feel like you and I need to do, and I don't know if we've ever done this in what now, a year and a half, almost going on 2 years since doing this show. I don't think we've actually done like a full episode on meat specifically. You know, like we've done protein, we've done fats, now we're doing a little bit of environment, but have we actually ever just done like why meat is good for you? Why meat is a health food? I don't know if we've ever.
I think we did in proteins, but maybe not. I don't know.
I think we touched on it in proteins, but like I want to cover meat from top to bottom, and obviously what we're talking about here is a part of that because they're constantly trying to manipulate the food supply. So we had Bovaer, and we're going to do a little more on that because I have some stuff that I promised you last week about the EPA. Something else that hit the headlines over the last few weeks, and so instead of going into it, I'm not going to even bring them up. I'm just going to throw them at you, Daryl, and we'll see if they're worthy of future conversation. But the FDA put eggs on the list of healthy foods, which was randomly shocking. Just out of nowhere. It's like, oh yeah, eggs are really healthy. Which
like they're just a joke at this point. They need to retire. Go away.
Maybe they will.
Go away.
Maybe they will retire. You know, I mean, RFK, maybe he can.
Yeah, he'll pull up his way out of.
That's true.
I love that.
If I can do more pull-ups than you, you're retired.
I'm into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever there was a show I remember when I was really young called Double Dare, and like there was a thing, it was a game show where there was like trivia, and then if you didn't know the answer you could do what's called the physical challenge. And that's kind of what I think of that, like physical challenge, and that's how you can beat your opponent if you can't beat them at the knowledge part of it.
Staring out the window and the new horizons are around the flames, so we're packed to go to the frozen hills where we will tame butterflies and snow, attach the strings so they will fly over death below. It will rain when we will cry. Data at the registry from a broken nuclear family.
It was always a really fun show.
We're not born in the same time.
So the next thing I have is I had a paper on healthy obesity. Even the face. I'm so glad we're on video now. You guys screenshot that face that Daryl just made. No, but this paper.
I'm gonna become memes, is what's gonna.
Yeah, I know. So but this paper argues in favor of what we have always said, which is that actually there really is no such thing, and that even if you're not developing the symptoms of metabolic syndrome, being at an obese BMI, eventually you will. And they go through the whole thing. So it's actually a very good paper trying to tell people you're sort of whistling past the graveyard if you think that you can be obese and still be metabolically healthy for the long term.
They trick you out with the title.
Correct. Yeah.
Love that.
I found a paper on, this is super cool. People talk about this all the time.
Are you gonna bring these up, or are you just letting me know?
I'm just firing them off because I want people to be like, yeah, comment and tell us what you want to hear about, what you want us to dig into.
Okay.
And if there's time left at the end of this episode, we can certainly jump back into any one of these. But then I found a great paper on ketones and how they specifically help in Alzheimer's disease, how they can, how the theory of Alzheimer's to some degree, not just type 3 diabetes being like a glucose energy issue, but also misfolded proteins in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Ketones can actually target these misfolded proteins and in either repair or remove them, which is super cool.
And they say depriving, I don't know how true this is, but they say depriving the cancer cells of sugars probably the first line of defense. And they're also saying that Alzheimer's is reversible now and preventative, obviously. If it's a glucose thing. But I was just listening to a podcast yesterday with Dr. Hyman, I think his name is. Yeah. Yep. He was specifically talking about Alzheimer's. I have a hard time. I like a lot of his stuff, but I have a hard time listening to him because he talks constantly, and really, really, really fast. I had to pause and go back.
Yep, it happens.
Just like you when you've been fasting for 4 days and you send me a 23-minute voice memo.
That just happened, and I tested my ketones, the highest I've ever tested. So it was a 96-hour fast. And for those of you listening, that's not a common and an often thing. It's like once a year, maybe twice a year. That's a really aggressive fast. But let me tell you something, Daryl. Wow. I forgot how good that can feel. And my ketones, for those of you at home who ever know what the numbers mean, they were 4.3 millimole, which is insanely high because nutritional ketosis is 0.5. So I was over 4 times higher than that. So it was serious. And it's interesting on my workout is how I noticed it, Daryl. And the workout was more energetic, efficient, but I also noticed, because your heart runs really well on ketones. So I also noticed the difference in my heart rate. I could really push myself past thresholds that once upon a time were much more difficult to push myself past. Very, very interesting physiological difference between working out in that state with very high ketones and working out using your typical glucose and just fatty acids as metabolic fuel. Very, very different. Very interesting.
So I wish I was a man sometimes, to be honest, because I can't play with fasting as much as you do, or to that degree. And that's just me personally. But it actually it creates too much stress for me on my body.
Even at the right time in your cycle?
Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not. Allostatic load. Right. So it depends, but definitely I'm also a person that's once I do something, I'm fucking all in. So
you don't say.
Yeah. So maybe I took it too far, but it's definitely, there are females listening to this, when it comes to fasting, we've done an episode on that already, so go back and listen to it. We definitely can't have the same approach as men do. Right. And I would not recommend 96-hour fastings for women very often.
No. I mean, like if you're going to do it, it's like a once a year thing. And I usually do it at the start of the year. But what happened was working on a project with a friend of mine, and she said she was fasting, and I felt bad. I was like, well, I'll just do that too, because I'm not going to eat in front of you. And then I felt really good the next day. And it turned into just one of those things where that's the thing people don't realize about hunger either, is that what you learn from fasting is that hunger is not exponential. It just doesn't, you don't get hungry and then just get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier.
It
it's
comes
cool.
at meal timings. It comes when you're used to eating, and then it goes away.
Sure does.
Yeah. I noticed that when I would train and come home from the gym, usually I have lunch when I come home, and then I wouldn't, and I'd be like, but then I'd leave the house and I'd be okay and I'd be fine. But it's a fine, like there's obviously great benefits to it, but it's just sort of that fine line, and maybe not doing it so excessively as I was, because it was starting to impact my sleep, and I got like cortisol face as well. It was just too much stress at certain times.
That's a great point. And I think that's exactly what it was, Daryl. I think, you and I were talking quite a bit at that point, and I was, you were even sending me pictures of your meals. And I remember saying, like, that's not enough food if you're fasting. Like, but this is the beauty of this, right? Like you're learning, because that probably was enough fuel at a meal when you're having multiple meals a day, but not if you're more aggressively fasting. So I just think it's a great learning experience for all of us, because it is slightly different for everybody. And yes, a 96-hour fast literally is a once a year thing. I ended up doing it starting, I think, the day after Christmas, and ran it through New Year's Eve. So it was just like it was that way to close out the year. But really felt amazing.
Big advocate of intermittent fasting, right?
Sure.
Like, definitely cut my meal hour early and prolonged shortened my eating window. Love that. That is not too stressful for me.
And tons of benefits there too. Yeah. We should probably, break that around again, like a fasting episode, do it, doing it a little differently, approaching it from different points of view, especially now that you have so much more experience. You have more things you can say about it personally. Whereas when we did it before, I think you were just starting to play around with it. You probably have a lot more understanding of what works and what doesn't work for you. And, the, quite frankly, audience can also benefit from that. Even though they can go back into our archives and find it. Some of those topics are always relevant, because people are always trying new things, and you never know when you're going to hear the same information at a different time and it resonates differently, So that's ketones and Alzheimer's disease. And what Daryl was also saying about cancer is very true. That's the Warburg effect. We've known that since the 1920s, that cancer thrives in a glucose environment. You can also use the amino acid glutamine, so it ferments. It utilizes sugar through glycolysis. And when you starve a cancer cell of those two fuel sources, very, very powerful results. And one of the pioneers in cancer as a metabolic disease is Thomas Seyfried, and he uses ketogenic therapy to reduce the glucose. He uses a drug called DAWN to block the glutamine receptors, so to reduce glutamine, because you really can't reduce your glutamine in your diet. That's pretty hard to do.
That's what I was going to say. Then how do you stop that? Because
you have to basically pulse this drug in order to block the receptors. And then he uses things like hyperbaric oxygen, because an oxygen-rich environment can create trouble for cancer cells. So he uses these multiple modalities in order to starve the cancer cells, while the healthy tissue remains perfectly capable of using fats as a fuel, because the hallmark of cancer cells is broken mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation, the ability to use oxygen to create fuel through things other than glucose. And cancer cells really don't have that ability, or it's greatly diminished. So by leveraging biology, you can improve your likelihood of preventing and also surviving cancers, which is pretty incredible. And then there was one other headline, Daryl, that I thought was really interesting. The Surgeon General just came out saying that even any amount of alcohol will increase your chances of cancer. Which
I saw that yesterday. Yeah.
Which is interesting, because
it's the third leading cause now.
Yeah. I couldn't find, the thing is, Daryl, I couldn't find the paper I don't think he was even referencing a paper. I couldn't find a paper in any of the articles that were talking about it. And that made me wonder, we have to be honest with ourselves and with the audience and say, even if research represents something that that may be a pre-existing opinion, like both of us think alcohol, relatively speaking, not very beneficial. It's not, people say, oh, one drink a day. most of that is just people wanting to drink one drink a day. Any kind of benefit you may get in like resveratrol from like a nice organic red wine, which is what I would probably drink if I had a drink, is going to be outweighed by the negatives. But whether that is a direct line to cancer, research like that probably can't show that. It's probably observational data that's not capable of showing that. And it's just like it's another one of those fear-mongering headlines. And you have to be honest, even if it's something that you think may be true, you have to be honest about the research's ability to actually show that. So as soon as I saw it, I was like, I don't think that's true in terms of what he thinks that paper can show. But then there was no paper to even reference. So I was like, where's he even getting this data from?
Yeah.
It's just interesting, you know.
Also a headline. Yeah, I saw that yesterday. I can't remember where, but I saw somebody posted it somewhere. But I mean, I'm kind of like, if people drink less alcohol, like.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where
but it's sort of playing devil's advocate with headlines, right? We're always like,
I want
against one side, but
I want people to be able to come to us for the truth, even though Daryl and I don't advocate alcohol. I want to be honest and say this research can't tell you what it's telling
whether
you.
it benefits our model or not. But.
Yeah, that's something you'll always get from Daryl and I think. I think we're pretty good like that. So I promised you some EPA data. Let's go back to what we talked about last week. We talked about Bovaer, which is the cow feed additive that is supposed to reduce climate change, whatever. There was something I wanted to show you on their website, Daryl. You said something last week about, what was it that you said? You said something about younger, capturing younger people like before they really even understand and they feel like they're fighting for a cause, right? Like in the whole.
Not necessarily younger people. It's just, I think they love to play on emotions to push a mission. So they will push a narrative to support their mission because they, for the most part, know that people won't do the research. And it's a lot of work to try and find out about emissions and carbon cycling and the difference between, the vegan products emissions. And it's a lot of work. You got to look all tons of places. So people are just like, yep, this scientist guy said it. So cool.
That's so true. Right? So let me show you this just because it made me think of what you had said. And I think this is kind of like how they manipulate us in subtle ways. It's just really funny, actually, that the headline is hysterical, how cows can help us fight climate change. Yeah, well, I mean, they do. They do on their own.
Yeah. Oh, it looks so cute. I just want to pet it.
And by the way, their tongues are very rough.
Yeah, they are. I actually knew my grandpa had a farm. Still has a farm, actually.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Small, very small, like for personal fun use. And we had a little donkey as well. Not sure what his use was. He was just kind of in the barn all the time.
Maybe hauling stuff around, maybe.
No, he was just like
like Eeyore.
He was just the donkey on the farm. Didn't do very much. Yeah.
But this is what I wanted to show you real briefly, your point. Like, look, it's like they want, the young child here has no idea about science. She has no idea about anything. And she thinks she's doing a good thing and she'll grow up doing that. That's how they use Greta Thunberg. That little girl doesn't know anything. She doesn't know anything. She's an actress, but she made a tearful plea about how, how dare you, ruin our planet. And it's like, but that's not what's happening. But it's this appeal to emotion constantly in order to deflect you from actually looking at any of the science behind anything. And when I saw this, I thought of that. And I was just like, I feel bad because this little girl has probably activist parents. And, if she doesn't look at the data herself, she's going to grow up doing things like raising her baby vegan, which, in some countries you can get arrested for because it's malnourishment, right? Like data and facts are all that matter. Because I actually want to solve the problem like you, Daryl. If I truly believed that cows were the problem and that they could threaten the very environment in which we live, I would be the first one to say, well, we got to do something about that. But that's just not what the data says.
No, and it says that by 2050, it would only eliminate global warming by 0.2 degrees Celsius.
Right. Yeah. I
Can
mean,
we throw that on like I don't know, jets
a
and
t-shirt.
no. I mean, like, I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a graph of like, this is what this causes, this is what this, and you did show me that already. The
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
like, and see which one is the big issue and which one we need to address.
Right.
And I don't think it's cattle.
Right. Yeah. And just another, like more playing on emotions, it's like, where is it? It's like, oh, look, you can still have your ice cream, even though it's treated with Bovaer. And by the way, I said this last week that I had an issue with the safety part of it. So there's one of the compound itself actually does have cytotoxic, meaning cellular death properties. But what they say is, oh, well, humans aren't really exposed to that. They're exposed to the downstream metabolites. But if you're handling Bovaer, be careful about inhaling it. Be careful about. So, I mean, Daryl, it's just another.
But on their website, they say it's safe for the handlers as well. They say it's perfectly safe.
Right. And that's not what the research says.
Yeah. My question is how do they know that it doesn't have adverse effects long term?
Yeah.
That's it's one of those things again that they're just rolling it out and we'll see how it goes until all of a sudden red dye number 40 is toxic for humans.
Yeah. I think this goes back to the reason why we can't allow them to have the narrative control of this is an urgent problem that must be addressed, because then, similar to COVID, you're able to roll out all kinds of dangerous public health measures that have no way of understanding the long-term effects, because we've convinced everybody that we have to change the climate by 2030, which again is ludicrous to think that you can affect the climate in that short of a time period.
You would have to study it for so long, and same with these effects. And they didn't study the COVID vaccine. Nope. They didn't give a fuck. They just rolled it out because you can't go after the manufacturers of vaccines. You can go after the manufacturers of drugs, which is why Pfizer, when they push out drugs, they have 1-year, 2-year, 3-year control trials. But when it's vaccines, they don't, because they don't care. You can't go after them. So here you go.
The system is so flawed that there's no incentive for them to study their own product because they can't be sued. So who cares? And that's, I mean, at least in this country, I believe in Canada, you can. We have a couple of problems in this country when it comes to vaccine manufacturers. A whole other story, but it's the same thing over and over again, repeated in different ways. And the glyphosate, similar thing. Look how long that's been on the market. There have been multiple cases, cancer cases, in glyphosate. So, would you be surprised at all if we're sitting here doing this show, in 2035, and we're like, Bovaer has now been shown to, it's like, you people, like, you just keep doing the same thing. Yeah. So. But this is what I wanted to bring up. Daryl just referenced it. I referenced it last week. I'm going to go full screen. I'm going to take us off the screen just so you guys can really see this. So what we're looking at here is directly from the EPA's own website. Okay. This is, and you'll see the years 1990 to 2020. If you're listening on podcast, it's basically a graphical representation of all of the different sectors and how they contribute to greenhouse gases. So you got transportation, electricity, industry, agriculture, commercial, and residential. This is up to 2020. Agriculture only represents 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, that was 2020. The most recent data I found, this is from 2022, and that number is down to 10%. 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. So why are we, as Daryl said last week, well, what about all the people like the Bill Gates, the Justin Trudeaus, the John Kerrys, the Al Gores that are all flying around in their private jets? That's 29%. Transportation is 29%. So if you think greenhouse gases are a real problem and we're all going to die, why are you focusing on cows, which, and I'm going to break this down further, because remember, agriculture is crop and animal. So I'm going to, on the next slide, I want to break this down even further. But what about the 29%?
Yeah.
No one seems to really care about that, unless it's you and I, Daryl. You and I aren't allowed to drive anywhere, but everybody else, the elite, as they like to call themselves, they can travel the globe and do whatever they like. This is going to be a really small slide, and I'm
40 cities coming to a theater near you.
That's right. See 40 cities, exactly. You're thinking the same way I am. This is the breakdown of that last slide. I know it's really small. If you guys are looking at this, I apologize. I couldn't make it any larger, and I don't know how to zoom. I don't even know if I can zoom here. But what you're seeing is that 10% represented in a pie chart. If you look at the bottom, you'll see of that 10%, 50.3 is crop cultivation, livestock, 43.3. Wow. So crop cultivation actually contributes more as a total to greenhouse gas emissions than animal agriculture.
For your fucking vegan products.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Okay,
Daryl,
you're vegan.
and what happens, Daryl, if we switch all to a plant-based diet? That 50% of the 10% goes up even further.
Totally.
So-
Can you bring back that the
Sure.
one with not the last one, the one before?
Sure. There you go.
So transportation is also transportation for said vegan products and all of those things as well. So
Oh,
if
good
we
point.
got rid of industrial farming and crops and vegans and vegan products and all that stuff and got back to regenerative farming, not
Mhm.
only would we support carbon cycle and more diversity and healthy soil, and even
Mhm.
perhaps taking into account that 2/3 of the soil is not being used for, or that can't be used for farming, then
Right.
we would be able to utilize that because we would
Right.
have more regenerative farms, therefore stepping away from more need for transportation of foods all over the world that are usually like more so from your industrial farming, right?
Yeah.
Being sent to big grocery stores. So it's a little bit backwards.
I mean, isn't that a great argument that you just made also for seasonality, for seasonal eating? I mean, that not only does that play on the lower carbon footprint of agriculture, but it also reduces the transportation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, any way you look at it, supporting the carbon cycle and reducing the transportation, again, Daryl and I are giving you that greenhouse gases are the problem. I don't actually believe that, but I'm playing the game
Yeah.
that carbon dioxide is somehow a poisonous gas, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But even if I play that game, your solution is incorrect.
Totally.
I
And
mean-
also, like on another point, if we just focused a little bit more on eating with the seasons and regenerative farming, then we would step away from consumerism as well as a whole.
Mhm.
Like the need to have pineapple right now. Sure.
Yeah, I know. There's so much to this, but that's where the
I
propaganda.
don't understand how. I mean, they do get it; they just don't look at it. But do you like? There has to be someone in a room being like, "This doesn't make sense." Excuse me.
Guy in the
back.
back. Yes. You in the back. You have a question?
Pulls out his red strings. Yeah.
According to my data, okay, meeting over, meeting adjourned. Yeah, I mean, then of course, Daryl, that leads us down the whole path of, I did a, you know what? We should let me see if I have this up here. Hold on. I wasn't going to do this here, but I feel like, there's just so much to talk about. We only have a few minutes left. All right. So I stumbled across something this week, right? That also, this is the other part of the argument. And this is what my mind does. This is how I break down problems. So we have this whole school of thought that if we just, go to a plant-based diet and we stop eating meat, we're going to fix everything, right? Despite the fact that things like Beyond Meat, they don't return anything in terms of, carbon sequestration, and they don't improve the soil. And the lab-grown meats, if you upscale them, some studies have shown they may be even like anywhere from like 3 to 25 times more detrimental to greenhouse gas emissions. Again, allowing for the fact that that's the real problem. Well, even the cell-based animal cultures are if you upscale them where everyone's eating them and not eating cattle, that's worse for the environment. So no matter which way you look, that's not the solution. But as we were talking about transportation, it made me think of something. I I'm going to have to find this real quick. I think I actually have it right here. All right, we're doing this, Daryl. We're going to take the last couple of minutes and we're going to do this together. Why don't you want to go a little conspiratorial with me for a moment?
As opposed to...
Yeah, it's true. Like any other day.
Which will come true.
Which will come true. 6 weeks. So check this out. Free the Tech finds 5,784 inventions suppressed by U.S. government secrecy orders. I just did a whole Rumble video on this. It hasn't come out yet. Actually, by the time you guys see this, it will be out. I just recorded it yesterday, actually. And what this is saying, basically, I'll just read you a couple of brief things here. As reported last month via PR Newswire, over 5,000 inventions are being suppressed via the U.S. government's classified patent program, according to official data obtained under a Freedom of Information Act request by the Federation of American Scientists. This means literally thousands of potentially groundbreaking inventions and technologies are being withheld from the public. What exactly is contained within the government's archive of 5,784 classified patents has been the source of rampant speculation for decades. However, this is the most important section I want you to listen to. However, a recent leak from the category list of 1971 finally provides some real-world insight, as categories from it include power supply, meteorology, propulsion systems, unique materials and devices. Interestingly, leaked data from the power supply section shows that modern-day solar panel technology was being restricted some 50 years ago. As a result, one can only imagine what's being suppressed today. I don't want to read any more of it, Daryl, because I don't want to go down like that whole rabbit hole, but just this is the first thing my mind said. Okay, you want to have the argument about climate change. You want to have the argument about animals. You want to have the argument about, like you said, Daryl, C40 cities and what cars I can drive, what clothes I can buy, what food I can eat. Then I demand ruthless transparency from the government. They're hiding almost 6,000 patents. Some of them have to do with green energy. Why would the government be hiding patents related to, clean energy? Could it be because exactly?
You'll have to be a video now.
Yeah, they're going to meme the hell out of you. They're going to turn you into a. It's going to be great. By the way, quite frankly, audience is very good at that. So meme away if you find something that you like. But Daryl, we're not even having an honest conversation. What they're doing is they're trying to feed you both the problem and the solution. Oh, this is the problem. Meanwhile, they're hiding all of this technology. If you want to have a real conversation with somebody, don't you have to have all the facts on the table so you can say,
no, like this isn't new though, Look at what happened during COVID.
Yes, right. But I think it is new to some people that the government will be suppressing solar panel technology from 50 years ago. So you could have had solar panels for the last 50 years and maybe, and I looked a little bit deeper, they were even more efficient back in the day, which means they provided more energy for less. So in other words, I don't know, maybe your power bill would be next to nothing. But see, that can't happen either. So I'm just not into having all these arguments about green energy and removing, and having to drive, mandating electric cars and mandating meatless Mondays if you're not going to sit there and reveal everything that human ingenuity has afforded us up until this point. We have to know the answers to those questions so we can have a reasonable discussion about this. But that's how you know that this isn't about having a reasonable discussion like Daryl and I want to have. This is about command and control.
Dictatorship.
That's right. So I don't know. That's the first place my mind went, is like, okay, you want to talk about this? Give me everything you got, and then we'll talk about it. And if it really comes down to we need to change our transportation.
Let's fucking go.
Daryl's ready to brawl, and that is not a good thing. You do not want to get on Daryl's bad side.
Not at this time in my cycle, nope.
Right. That relates not just to fasting, folks. Let me tell you. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's where I sit, Daryl, with all this. I think, that's a good place to end this. And it's a good, it's a fine point on what we've talked about last week and this week. I don't want to break into any other topics because we don't really have time. We can save all those other topics were super interesting. We can maybe save them for next week. But for right now, it's just, man, I just hope people really, the takeaway is, I just, like everything, I just want you to think for yourselves, and I want you to really take that precautionary approach. And, you know, even if they say Bovaer is safe, and, you know, maybe it is safe, I'll even grant them that. Maybe it's perfectly safe. Interfering with Mother Nature sometimes it has known downstream consequences, but most of the time it also has completely unknown consequences that we cannot prepare for. And what if some of those create problems worse than the ones you were trying to solve? Does anybody think about that? I mean, Bill Gates also wants to block out the sun. I mean, what's the downside there, right, Daryl? It's like beyond words sometimes what that man alone, let alone everybody else like him, but what that one man alone thinks that he can do on behalf of the human race. I'm just going to block out that thing up there, the thing that gives life to the planet. I'm going to block that out because, you know, I have this idea.
Yeah. Well, it's because he's fucking loaded.
Yeah. He has nothing better to do with his money.
I don't know what he thinks. I don't want to assume what he thinks. Be great to have a conversation with him. Maybe we can bring him on the show. Hey, yo, Bill.
Yeah.
Let's have a chat.
You know, Daryl, I was thinking this the other day. You know, he's never pushed on anything because he never does shows. He will only do an interview or a show where he is basically, you know, like bowed to. He will only do shows with like these sycophants who are like, Bill Gates, you're like amazing. And like, I have watched your career all these years. So let's sit down and talk. Those are the only shows that Bill Gates does.
Love your apples, your appeal apples.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll never sit there and take any real incoming fire. You know why? Because, Daryl, I don't believe he's smart enough to handle himself in that kind of environment.
You say he's a businessman, right? It's not about, he doesn't know much of the moves, the consequences of the moves that he's making. He's looking for cash. So
I don't know, Daryl. I guess it's just like, it's the humility in me that, like, even if I had the money and the ability and the respect, and someone said, hey, Jay, all of humanity.
Sometimes just the camera goes in and out. That's okay.
I'm working on this, folks. I really am working on this. This little
so angry in that photo.
Daryl, that's my concentration face. It's not angry.
Okay. Anyway, you were saying,
even if the whole human race came to me and said, Jay, we want you to solve this problem. Well, I would never think to block out the sun. Because in my mind, I would think, what if I was wrong? And I think having that what if I was wrong little voice on one of your shoulders, I think Bill Gates is missing that voice, that what if I'm wrong voice. Like, he's so cocky, has so much hubris that he doesn't even think, or he thinks, who cares? I have my underground city built, you know, but it's like, I couldn't even make that move, even if the entire planet wanted me. 100% of the planet was like, Jay, I want you to make this decision. I'd be like, I can't make that decision.
That's the other point I was going to say on that is like, I wouldn't be so, how do I say? I wouldn't want to dictate what we need to do with our planet, right? Like, it would be a conversation with the people, not
absolutely
me making the choice. That's the difference.
And that is the difference between Daryl, Jay,
and Bill Gates.
And Bill Gates.
One of them.
One of the many. But the invite stands if you guys want to tag Bill Gates. No, I'm just kidding. He can come on the show anytime, and we'll have a little conversation with Bill, see what he thinks about some of my charts.
I'm just gonna let you and him go. I'm just like,
oh, Daryl, you don't want to do that. You'll be bailing me out of prison. All right. Well, guys,
that's it.
Thank you for hanging out. We have a whole bunch of stuff, but remember all those things I mentioned, the FDA and the eggs and the ketones and the Alzheimer's and the alcohol and the cancer, any of those things pique your interest, write them in the comments below. We will cover them. We love to cover anything that you guys want to cover, but until then, thank you guys for hanging out, and we'll talk to you soon.
Ciao for now.